Today, we pop into dessert world. We're making individual tarte tatins with puff pastry. Super simple, super quick, very easy. A great one to do with the kids or those who are challenged in the kitchen. And we're making individual ones today. Why? Because I don't like to share when it comes to dessert. Stick around. I love dessert. I've got a wicked big sweet tooth. I'll eat almost anything sweet, and people ask me chocolate or fruit-based. Yes, of course. Tarte Tatin is one of the easiest things you can do at home. I am not a pastry chef, and that's okay. I feel confident that my Tarte Tatin is wonderful. Now, you may have heard of Tarte Tatin. Typically, it's done with apple or pear, and this is kind of a French thing. This is really an upside-down dessert, which is kind of great as well. It's fun for the kids to see and do. You're gonna need some puff pastry the way I do it. And in France, sometimes they use something called pâte sucrée or pâte brisée, which is like extra sexy pie dough. We ain't gotta get into all of that. I buy pie dough, puff pastry. I also buy pie dough, but I buy my puff pastry frozen at the grocery store, and I've got a box here. It's a couple of bucks, and you wanna look for a good brand. If all you can find is the Pepperidge Farm, that's absolutely fine. Keep it frozen until you need it thawed out. And if it comes folded, you want to unravel it back into a flat sheet and chuck it back in the freezer. There's no shame in buying puff pastry. It takes about 4 or 5 days to make by hand. It's super finicky. You need a lot of space. It's really a pain in the butt. So I buy it, and that's okay. Now our fruit today is seasonal fruit. We've got some beautiful peaches from Full Belly Farms. I've also got a couple that I picked up at Caramelization Farms, which are some of my favorite stone fruit in the Bay Area. Artie is one of my favorite guys at the farmer's market to meet and talk with and see every week. And so I highly suggest you go and see Artie at Caramelization Farms. And of course, Full Belly has great stuff. So we have peaches, and I've also got some local raspberries that we picked up as well. Again, any fruit is great for this. This is mostly going to be peach today. Raspberries are a little too watery on their own to do this, but I've had great success doing blueberry tarte tatins, fig tarte tatins, pineapple tarte tatins. It's really, really simple. And you probably have the rest of the ingredients kicking around at home as well. I've got some sugar, a little bit of vanilla. I'm going to put bourbon in mine because I can. And that's pretty much it. Maybe a little bit of butter. And the process is pretty simple. So let's get started. All right, so I've got my puff pastry here. When I bought the box of puff pastry, I found it in the freezer section, and that's where you're gonna find it. And there are a lot of different brands out there. Again, on the low, cheap end are gonna be like Pepperidge Farm. I saw one brand that was like $16 a pack. It's made by organic butter churned by left-handed albino triplet, elves in the off season from working for Santa or something. I don't know what could ever justify it being that expensive. It's better make itself. But whatever you can find is great. And if you want to do this with pie dough, you totally can. That's absolutely fine. But I've got this puff pastry, and you really want to work with this pretty cold. Somewhere between frozen and just very chilled. The more cold it is, the more solid it's going to be. And we need some heft to it to kind of be able to work with. I had thawed this box, and when they were thawed, I rolled the sheets out flat. And to my surprise, this brand has round pieces as opposed to square pieces, which is fine. And then I chucked it back in the freezer, and I've had that in the fridge and in the freezer kind of going back and forth to get it to the point where it's cold enough that it's solid to work with and it's not floppy too much, but it's not super frozen. If it's super frozen, it's going to crack and you're not going to be able to work with it very well. One of the first steps I have to do is I have to measure how I'm going to cut this. Now today for our individual tarte tatin, I'm going to use little ramekins, and I picked these up at the grocery store. You can find them at any kitchen supply place or home cooking store. And these are going to be for individual tarte tatins. You can find little disposable metal ramekins if you want to. That's fine, and that would be great. But I've got these ramekins here in place. And so one of the first things I want to do is I want to figure out the diameter of these. And I can do that either by putting this down on the dough surface and making a little impression and then taking a knife and cutting it out. Or I've got this great little set of nylon cutters. These little nylon cutters are awesome. And I just take and I figure out which one fits on the inside diameter of my ramekin, and that works great. And so I'm going to use this. Now I'm making 2 little individual tarte tatins, one for now and one for later for me, because this is going to be great. So let's start by cutting out our puff pastry. Again, you want this to be nice and cold, so it's firm enough to cut through cleanly, but you don't want it to crack and be brittle. So I just push down and give a little twist. 1, and 2. And you can see this is only 1 sheet. The box of puff pastry came with 2 sheets, so you could make, probably 10 or 12 of these out of 1 box of puff pastry. I've got my rounds, and I'm gonna throw these back in the freezer. Typically when you're working with puff pastry, you want it to be cooking it from frozen if possible. That gives it time for the steam inside to build up and for you to get a better puff, the puff and puff pastry. And so it's a good rule of thumb, freeze it if you can. So back into the freezer for a little bit while I work on the rest of this. All right, now that that's taken care of, I'm gonna get started on my fruit. I've got my peaches here, and obviously I wanna make sure these don't have any seeds or pits in them that are too big. Again, cherries, apples, pears are traditional, of course, but figs are awesome. You don't have to do anything with figs. Blueberries just they're fine on their own. And so a lot of great options for a quick and easy one. But these peaches are just absolutely beautiful, and I'm gonna kind of make a mixture of the Caramelization Farms and the Full Belly Farms peaches. So I'm gonna get these, the fruit cut off from around the pit, and we'll start with that. All right, so to work with peaches, what I do is to get these separated from their stones. And I don't know if these are freestone peaches yet. Freestone peaches are what you call late in the season when the peaches are ripe. The flesh will fully be able to be removed from that pit on the inside. Early in the season, typically, the varieties are what are called clingstone peaches, and you have to kind of cut the fruit off the pit because it doesn't release. Either way, they're gonna be delicious, and you don't need particularly beautiful fruit for this. If you have a little bit of bruisey fruit, that works, or maybe you can buy seconds. I know sometimes Caramelization has seconds peaches, which maybe don't look the best, but they've got a great personality and are probably lonely, and so you should give them a chance. Back to our peaches here. We've been talking about peaches the whole time. So what I do is I start by locating what I call the butt crack of the peach. This is really the butt crack of the peach. And I, just like an avocado, is I kind of insert my knife along that butt crack and run it around the world as if I was doing an avocado. And then I'll take and I will twist. Bingo. And these look like freestone peaches. You can see how cleanly that released from that pit. So that's a good start. I will then come top to bottom and kind of do the same thing until I can grab onto that pit and just pull it and remove it. And these look like white peaches, which are exciting. I love white peaches. Yellow peaches work great for this though, but white peaches just speak of summer to me. So I'm gonna do a couple more. And let's take a look at the Caramelization peach, a little bit bigger than the full belly peaches. I'm not sure the variety on these peaches, and I'm not sure if this is a white or a yellow one. I asked Artie for the best tasting peach, and this is what he gave me. Same thing, fingers crossed it's freestone. Ooh, it looks like it, and this is a yellow peach. I find that yellow peaches have a little bit more peachy flavor and a little bit more acid to them, so they're a little bit more balanced. White peaches are so sweet. Sometimes you lose some of that beautiful, delicate peach flavor. So same thing here. I'll cut that down, twist that out. Look how beautiful those peach pits are. Now, quick trivia bit. Did you know that they make almond extract from peach pits? Almonds and peaches are in the same family. And you do that by taking and smashing the peach pit in a Ziploc bag with a little hammer or something, and then toasting all of that off. Do it in a well-ventilated area because, if you don't have the exhaust fan or a window open, if you do a ton of these, then it can get a little bit funky, the air. I think it's cyanide or arsenic or whatever, whichever one of those is a gas gets released into the air. So just be careful. Just as long as you get a window open, you're fine. And same thing with your cherry pits. You can do this as well. You smash them all down, toast them off in the oven for 30 minutes at 300 degrees or until they're well toasted. Maybe not quite that hot. And then you can infuse that either into a neutral spirit like grain alcohol or vodka, or I also like to simmer it in cream to make a wonderfully almond flavored cream that's great for whipped cream or other desserts. And so the French call that noyau. That bit is extra for free today. You got a little extra education and knowledge. So I've got my peaches here, and I just want to cut these into, the smaller the pieces that we cut them, the more water they're going to release. So I don't want to cut them incredibly small. I want maybe a little bit bigger than bite size so that they do break down. So I might take each quarter and I might quarter that. So 1/16 of a peach. That's a pretty good chunk size, I think. All right, so now that I've got my peaches cut up, I'm gonna add a little bit of vanilla and a splash of bourbon to them. I'm using vanilla paste because I like it and it puts all the little black specks and everything, like, you know, the expensive vanilla ice cream that we never had growing up. So this stuff is very, very strong and very expensive. Vanilla is crazy expensive right now. A year ago, or a couple of years ago, I used to be able to buy the 32 ounce of vanilla paste for like 30 bucks. They're now like 180 bucks. So there's something going on with vanilla. Invest in vanilla if you can. So just one little drop of this vanilla paste. And again, this is scraped vanilla bean that has been suspended in like glucose. And so it's just like vanilla extract. If that's all you have, that's fine. If you want to skip vanilla, that's okay as well. If you want to add almond extract into this, that would be delicious. Lemon would be fine. A lot of different kind of flavor extracts would be great. Maple if you wanted to. I've got that in there. I'm going to add a little bit of lemon. Just the juice of not quite half a lemon, just a couple of drops, especially where these peaches are so sweet and delicious. That looks good, and just a little bit of a toss. Now, if you wanted to put, if I was doing apple or pear, I would do cinnamon, or I probably wouldn't do cinnamon. I would actually use the Moroccan spice mixture Ras Al Hanout, and that is a spice blend that has a lot of cinnamon undertones, but is much more complex. But cinnamon is fine as well. I just think cinnamon is very, very overused of a spice, and people use it too much and in too high of a quantity, and so. A little splash of bourbon. This is a bourbon I'm not particularly fond of drinking on its own or in a cocktail. So it's my cooking bourbon. Just a little finger over the top and a little 1-2 count. That's probably a tablespoon of bourbon. I don't need to make it too juicy. Bourbon and peaches, can't go wrong. Just a couple of raspberries. Peach and raspberry are a classic flavor combination. And so the classic dessert peaches melba is a poached peach with ice cream and raspberry sauce, and that's delicious. So just a couple of these, and again, these are really gonna contribute to the water content of our final dish. So that's maybe maybe half of one of the little containers of berries that you may find, a little half pint. And so I got my fruit. I think I'm ready to go. We've got to head over to the stove because we have got to caramelize some sugar. Now, if I was doing a full-size Tarte Tatin for a family or for 4 portions, and I was okay to share, which we've established that I'm not, then you would do this in a pan and you would kind of build your Tarte Tatin almost completely on its own first and then heat it all together. But since we're doing individual and I can't caramelize sugar in my ramekin on its own like I would if I was in a pan, we've got to start by caramelizing sugar. So let's go over to the stove. All right, we're at the stove. We're gonna make a quick caramel. Caramel is just sugar that has been caramelized. It's simple, right? And what it is it's really a controlled burning of sugar. The more color, the more flavor. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. It's pretty universal. And so I'm just gonna heat a small saute pan dry. I only need a couple tablespoons, maybe 2 tablespoons of caramel per ramekin. And so I might caramelize down maybe a little bit less than a cup of sugar. I'm not even really gonna measure it. And I've got a non-stick pan. This would be great in, an enameled cast iron thing if you got a small one, or a stainless steel saute pan would be fine as well. Just make sure that your pan can handle pretty high heat. Now the reason I do this dry is because if you add water, and a lot of recipes out there for caramel have you add water, and then you're brushing the sides with a wet pastry brush, you run the risk of it crystallizing, which is a whole science thing that I don't really understand. It's irreversible. It makes it a nightmare. You don't get a nice caramel. But when you do this dry, you don't run that risk. You want to make sure your pan is obviously pretty clean and no little gunk down in there, because that could foul the whole thing. But I'm going to preheat this for a few minutes so that basically as soon as I add my sugar into the pan, it's going to start to liquefy and color pretty quick. Now while I'm at the stove, I'm going to preheat my oven to 400 degrees plus. Anytime you're cooking puff pastry, you got to have 400 degrees or higher to create the steam at the right level that it puffs the dough before it cooks crispy. And so I might go a little bit higher since he's a little bit smaller, probably actually 410 for today. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. All right, my pan is preheated. Time to get my sugar in there. I'm gonna be using a heat-proof rubber spatula. You can use a wooden spoon. If you have a pan that's not non-stick, then feel free to go ahead and use a metal spoon, and that's fine. And I just pour this right in. Again, I wanna do about a cup. That might be a little bit more than a cup. But you can see it already starts to kind of really melt down and start to liquidize. And I just start to stir this. This doesn't have to be a perfectly smooth mixture. Again, we're not making caramel sauce, which is different than caramel. Caramel sauce has cream and butter added to it. but I'm gonna just stir this around, and what's liquefying will immediately start to clump with the white granulated sugar, and that's okay. I'll use my spatula here to kind of break up any big major chunks. Now keep in mind that when sugar is very hot, it is a liquid. It is molten like lava, and the molecules of sugar are smaller than the pores of your skin, and so they will burn you very badly. So be very careful. But it's helpful to think about sugar when it's warm as a liquid and when it's cold as a solid. And so if you have sugar that is that is seized and is very firm, all you have to do is heat it back up. It's a great cleaning trick for any of your caramel bits here. You can see this goes pretty quickly. I'm gonna turn my fan on, just low, so I don't set off the smoke alarm. Now remember, we said the more color, the more flavor. And I want this to be pretty lightly flavored. I want it to add certainly some caramel flavor, but I don't want it to be very bitter. And so I think we've got a good amber color here, a good light amber color. See the color of that on my spatula. Time to pull it. Okay, we've got our caramel squared away. Now we've got to get this into our ramekins, and it's gonna be a little bit tricky to transfer. I'm gonna switch to a regular spoon. I'll get rid of my heat-proof spatula, and just a regular spoon for this. And again, it's really important to be very careful, because this caramel is molten, liquid, burn city. Some of the worst burns I've ever had in my career. Now, you may be able to pour this. I'm probably gonna spoon, maybe I'll pour. Either way, very similar to when you're making creme caramel or flan. You gotta get this caramel in the bottom. And I didn't measure this. You gotta be careful when you pull this off the heat, it's gonna continue to cook. And so that's why I pulled it at that kind of medium amber color. And again, you can see that's got that good caramel kind of coloration to it. So let's try to pour. Ooh, it worked pretty well. Now the stop is the hard part. All right, catch the drifts. Okay, so I've got about 1/8 of an inch of caramel in each of my ramekins here, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna pack the fruit on top. While I'm packing my fruit into my ramekins, back on the stove, I've got my pan that I made my caramel in with the spoon that I used, and I've got it filled up with water and just on low heat to dissolve. It's a good cleaning tip. It takes a little while, so put that on in the background while you're building the rest of your Tarte Tatin. I've got a little spoon, and I've got here my fruit, and I'm gonna spoon my fruit right into my ramekins, and I wanna pack these pretty well. Now again, keep in mind, the softer the fruit, the bigger the pieces you need to keep it. And so things like figs, I would just have them, you know, blueberries, obviously keep them whole, but you know, if you're doing apples or pears, you know, you can cut them a little bit smaller than you might if you had, you know, softer fruits like these peaches. And so I've got that all down in there, and I'm even gonna use my hands and give it a little press so I really get that fruit down into the ramekin and pack it full. You can smell that bourbon already. A bit more in that one. Ooh, it looks like I got enough fruit to make another Tarte Tatin tomorrow. Awesome. All right, we're almost finished up. These are about to go in the oven, very close. I've just transferred these to a sheet pan lined with parchment paper to make cleanup easier down the road. It could be a little piece of foil or whatever. I just don't want that to be all up on my sheet pan. Sheet pans are hard enough to clean. I'm gonna take a little bit of butter, and I'm just gonna add a little dab of butter on top of each of these. That's gonna help make this taste extra delicious, you know, and we'll make some mea culpas to the French, as it were, for, you know, bastardizing their dessert a little bit using frozen puff pastry. So I've got that. And now what we need is to top it with our puff that's in the freezer. So let me grab those rounds, we'll top them off, and it's time for the oven. So we've got our rounds from earlier. I just take these, and I put them on top, and I'm gonna push them right down. These are nice and solid, which is great. And again, I've got my oven preheated now to about 410 degrees. You really want to be above 400, and you can go as high as 425 if you think this is going to cook a little bit quicker. And so I may have got a little too much fruit in that ramekin. That one's better. We'll see. It's going to be delicious either way. All right, let's get these in the oven. All right, I put that in the most middle of the oven that I can, the middle rack pushed into the middle, and again, just above 400 degrees. If you've got convection, use it. You should be using it all the time, unless you're making souffle, and you ain't making souffle. I'm not making souffle, but I don't have convection of it. I hope you do. It's gonna be better. Still 400 plus. Let's check on those in about 12, 14 minutes. All right, I checked these at 12 minutes. They were unremarkable looking. So let's take a look at them after about 16 minutes. I think we're starting to see some action. Let's take a look. Oh yeah. So those are starting to look pretty good. I think they're gonna be done in about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So I'm gonna give them a check after about 8 minutes and keep an eye on them. And we'll go from there. They're looking pretty delicious though. We're getting close. Yes, amazing. I think they're ready. Let's pull them out. You can see why I have that sheet pan underneath. Otherwise, you'd have all that sticky fruit juice and overflow on the bottom of your oven, and that would be bad news. All right, these have sat for a second just to cool down a little bit. I don't want to let them sit too long because all of that molten sugar, as it cools, is going to go back solid again. And so you want these to still be pretty warm when you turn and flip these out. Now, this is a little bit of a always an exciting part in the process. When you flip the whole thing upside down, definitely not something for the kiddos to do. Mom and dad should do this one if you're doing these with the kids at home. And so I've got a simple little plate up dish here. And the way we go about this, keep in mind those ramekins are super, super hot, is I'm just gonna set this off to the side. And I will grab a ramekin with my towel here very carefully. As it's sat out of that oven for a minute, that ramekin sticks the pan a little bit. And I take my service plate, my service bowl, and I put it on top. And then you say a prayer to the Tarte Tatin gods. 1, 2, 3. Use that momentum as you go up. You flip. That one out of the way. And now that crust is on the bottom. And as you release the whole thing, yes! Man, that looks delicious. I got a little piece of fruit stuck in the bottom of the ramekin. That's okay, you can dig it out if you want to, but I love the way that looks. Now, you can see my puff pastry shrunk. This brand of puff pastry that I use shrunk a little bit, and so it would have maybe been a little bit better to cut that at the exact diameter of the ramekin, or maybe even a little bit bigger if it's gonna continue to shrink in. That's the first time I've used that brand. And so I want to garnish this off. You could certainly do it a la mode at home if you want to with ice cream. Whipped cream would be great. But again, in ode to the French, I'm going to use Creme Fraiche. This is Bellwether Creme Fraiche, and it's my absolute favorite. I always have some in the fridge kicking around. If you're on the East Coast and you can't find Bellwether Creme Fraiche, then I really love the Vermont Creamery, Vermont Butter and Cheese Co., Vermont Creamery, whatever they're calling themselves these days. Their creme fraiche is by far my favorite on the East Coast. So Bellwether or the Vermont is really, really delicious. And this is great. This is like France's version of sour cream. Just getting a spoon here. This is like France's version of sour cream, and it's got a little bit of sweetness to it. It's just so lovely and great. Classic to top on top of fruit desserts. And so just a little spoonful of that. And as that sits, it's gonna melt down. Watch. And this is going to be a great dessert. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. A puff pastry is a really fun and simple thing to work with. And again, because you can buy it already pre-made at the grocery store, it makes it really quick and easy as well. I always have a box kicking around in my freezer for those unexpected guests, or if I have some vegetables or other things that I want to come up with something unique. It's a great option with turnovers and all kinds of other fun things. Stay tuned to my channel here. We're gonna have a lot more puff pastry recipes now and into the future. And of course, you can fill in the food with whatever ingredients you have. Working with puff pastry is a lot of fun. We can't wait to have you back for our next episode. We'll see you then. Do it.